Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home. Welcome everybody to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. It is a great day to be alive. And it's a great day to be sweet to yourself. Okay. So that's a lot of what this show today is going to be about, is just lightening up a little bit and being super sweet to yourself. Now, first, I want to tell you that if you have not yet read my book, the Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now, it's on Audible. So you don't even have to read it. You can listen to the book. And I forget to say that here. And I got some statistics from Audible, and I've had over 200 purchases in the past few months alone. And I'm just like, wow, like I should let you guys know, you can listen to the book. It's 5.5 hours. It's incredibly short. I recorded it last summer during COVID, and it was so much fun to record. I went to a basement studio, recording studio, and I banged it out. It was not easy. It's a little tedious recording a book, but it's done and it's great. It is not perfect. Hello, it's not perfect. And so it's just right. It is absolutely just right. So get it on Audible. It's like a couple credits. If you don't have Audible, you can look it up. But nowadays we're also busy. We're also busy that listening to books is a great solution for taking in good information without being bogged down in time. We can multitask and walk and ride our bikes and be in the car and whatever else, fall asleep, fall asleep listening to a book. And you're not cheating if you listen to a book. Okay. I have a friend who just confessed that she was listening. She read Anna Karenina on Audible and apologized for it and said, I know I'm cheating. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're reading like this, major classic novel and you're apologizing. Hello. So you're not cheating if you listen to my book instead of read my book. But guess what? You're going to get a lot of help because that book has helped a lot of people. I mean, it just has. It makes it very easy to understand why, your eating struggles have nothing to do with food. So I explain that in that book. I recommend you pick it up. And of course, you can also get the real physical copy from Amazon. And also there is a Kindle version as well, if you're into Kindle and reading it that way electronically. So I hope you pick that up. And also I'm recording this live in the Secret Sauce group because that's what I do. And if you haven't joined the Secret Sauce group, go to Facebook and type in the Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating and join us in the Secret Sauce group. And let's keep the conversation going. You can comment. I'll be in there commenting. Love to see you in there and love to offer you support. All right, on with the show. So let's dig in today and talk about what I think is a big problem for a lot of people that I see, and that's perfectionism. And if you are a perfectionist and you know it, go ahead. If you're a perfectionist and you know it, raise your hand or clap your hands. So you can clap your hands, but go ahead and post in the comments. It just sounded like the song, remember, that we grew up with. Perfectionism is a thing. It's some consider it literally. It borders on a mental illness such as OCD, but it's not OCD. There's a difference, but it's a thing, and it can certainly drive you nuts. Okay, so it can drive you nuts, and it can definitely drive you to eat. So that's why I want to talk about it today, because I see this in my clients and this tendency. And it leads to overeating. It basically creates the stress that you then stress eat over. So that's why I want to really dig into this topic today. Okay, so let's get started. I personally can't claim to be a perfectionist. I am not a perfectionist. I'm kind of a I don't know what you'd call me, but I'm definitely not a perfectionist. I just am happy to get something done. I'm not big on getting it done perfectly. And I thought there was something wrong with me when I realized this about myself. And then I found out that Oprah claims to not be a perfectionist either. And like, I'm like Oprah. And so I'm like, cool, I'm good. So not everybody is a perfectionist, and not every emotional eater is a perfectionist. Which I'm not. And I'm definitely an emotional eater, having been 50 pounds overweight and struggled, with my weight for years. Definitely I am an emotional eater, but I'm not a perfectionist. And so we don't all subscribe to perfectionism, but a lot of people do. So I want to talk about why this is and why you might be a perfectionist, and then what to do about it. Okay. Perfectionism is that terrible thing where we put a ton of pressure on ourselves to do a good job and to do it perfectly. And that's where the rub is. Okay. When we want to do it perfectly, we either, we know we can't, in which case we don't do anything at all. We're like, screw it. If I can't do it perfect, I don't want to do it at all. Or we put ourselves under intense pressure, to where we just fall apart, or we're hard on ourselves, mean to ourselves, have super negative self-talk, and ultimately cause a lot of stress, and then like take a nosedive in the food. And that's why we have to really take a look at this. Obviously, perfectionism is akin to procrastination, because if you're a perfectionist and you feel like I have to do this perfectly, and you know that you can't, you then often will say, screw it, I'm not going to do it at all. Do you ever feel that way? Have you ever had that reaction? Like, if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it. A lot of people are that way, and then it doesn't get done, and you put it off. And then there's a whole, host of negative thoughts about yourself on account of that. And it just exacerbates the problem. So that's why procrastination is so often fueled by perfectionism, is because we perceive we can't do it perfectly, and then we don't want to try. So there's a lot to unpack here with perfectionism. But I want to do this because I know that as an emotional eater, regardless of whether you're a perfectionist or not, you're super hard on yourself. Okay. So this is endemic to the emotional eater's experience. If you struggle with food and weight, chances are you're super mean to yourself. I know this about you. Okay. Because I was this way too. You put a lot of pressure on yourself. You talk trash to yourself. You say you're no good. You say you're a loser. You say, you beat yourself up when you don't do something, period, or if you don't do it right. And oftentimes that barrage of negativity, when we don't do something perfectly, can keep us from even starting, because we know how painful it is, how mean we are to ourselves if we don't do it perfectly, in which case it's like, I don't want to go through that pain, and we won't start on account of that as well. So, it's really, really, really harmful when we are perfectionistic, and we are mean to ourselves. And so this is what I really want to help you turn around. Perhaps perfectionism has shown up for you as early on as, a little kid. Perhaps you grew up with harsh messages in your home, an alcoholic parent, or a parent who is hard on himself or herself, in which case you got a lot of criticism, as the spillover. We are always doing to others as a result of what we're doing to ourselves. So for instance, my dad was super hard on himself, and he was pretty hard on us. I was the youngest, so I didn't get it as harshly as my sisters did, my older sisters. But he was pretty mean to himself, where he, I think, probably was a perfectionist, held himself to a very high standard. It paid off for him. He did well in school. He got scholarship. He went to Harvard Business School. He was super successful, in his endeavors, in work, but he was mean to himself. And on account of that, we got the spillover. We got some harsh messaging, especially my sisters. By the time it got to me, I sort of got a pass. So I was a bit spoiled, to tell you the truth. But my sisters got a lot of harsh messages on account of his being harsh to himself. And guess what? When we're harsh to ourselves, others around us get harsh messages. Maybe your kids, maybe your spouse, people you work with. Whatever we're doing to ourselves, it spills over. We don't contain it always within our own minds. oftentimes it gets spewed out to other people. And that creates a lot of problems in our relationships. So my sister's got a lot of harsh messages about not being good enough, not doing things well enough, you know, and that's a bummer, you know, and they've done a lot of work on themselves to work through that. But point is, when we are mean to ourselves, it causes a cascade of problems. And that's what I want to help you get out of, because when we beat ourselves up, when we're harsh to ourselves, oftentimes it will result in hurting ourselves with food, right? So when we feel bad about ourselves, and low self-esteem is a result of perfectionism, it's both a cause of perfectionism and a result of perfectionism. What does that look like? Well, when we feel bad about ourselves and we do have messages that we're not good enough, we put pressure on ourselves to be the best, to do, you know, the best job. And that drives that perfectionism. And when we don't do the best job, or we don't get the A, it makes us feel worse about ourselves. So it works both ways, as you can see. But perfectionism is a trap, because rarely can we do something perfectly. And what is perfect anyway, right? What is perfect? What is perfect? You know, an A, 100 on a test. Okay, that's maybe a perfect score. But when we're in our adult life, generally we're not scoring. Okay, we're not scoring. So it's up to us to decide what's perfect. And, you know, if you have low self-esteem, if you are harsh on yourself, it's never going to be perfect, you know, and it probably can't be anyway. In reality, it's not realistic to expect perfection. So it's a setup, you know, when we expect perfection from ourselves and we don't deliver, then we have this cascade of negative thoughts about ourselves. And then food is right there. I mean, the problem with being an emotional eater is that it always ends up in overeating. Whatever we're doing, it ends up in overeating. You know, I often say that overeating or food addiction is the hardest of all addictive habits, because you have to eat. You have to eat 3 times a day, or however many times a day. And you can't just put the plug in the jug like you do with alcohol. So if you are being mean to yourself, if you are, you know, against yourself, or holding yourself to too higher standard, the result is always going to end up in food. If you're an alcoholic and you have the plug in the jug, it won't necessarily end up in drinking, because you don't have to drink each day to get by. But with food's always right there if our mental health is not in tune. So it's really important to watch these thoughts and watch these patterns in ourselves, because, you know, all negativity and all roads of negativity lead to overeating. And that's why we've got to stop just dwelling on diets and exercise and start getting to the root of the problem, because all roads of negativity lead to overeating. And if you're just focused on dieting and exercise, and you're not dealing with, you know, your thoughts and what's going on in your head, before you know it, you're going to be eating and you don't know what got you there. And so at Heal Your Hunger, we start really digging into this and what's going on. What are my thought patterns, and how can I interrupt those patterns? So the thing I want you to do first is start watching your thoughts and watching for perfectionism. You know, perfectionism often shows up as black and white thinking. If I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all. That's black and white thinking. One of my favorite sayings to combat black and white thinking is, done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect. Okay, so stop trying to be perfect. Just get it done. This is a great phrase to use if you are a procrastinator. And so I tell myself this because I procrastinate. You know, I don't think out of perfectionism as much, because as I said, I don't really hold myself to probably a high enough standard, but I tend to be like, whatever. I got kind of like whatever attitude. And so I'm not super perfectionistic, but I am a procrastinator, and procrastination comes more from fear, I think, on my part, fear of doing something that's hard. And so I put off things that are not fun or hard. That's where my procrastination comes from. But the bottom line is, I use this phrase when I do procrastinate, and I say, Tricia, done is better than perfect. I sometimes procrastinate doing these shows. You know, I sometimes procrastinate doing these shows, And as you can tell, I'm subscribing to done is better than perfect because it's never perfect. But getting it done is the key for me. Getting in here and talking to you, recording a podcast, whatever it is that I'm needing to do in my business. I tell myself, Tricia, done is better than perfect. And I am so imperfect at delivering my message to you. And I'm okay with that. The good news is I don't have to be perfect. And probably you wouldn't relate as much if I were perfect, right? So my little flub ups here and there, I don't try to edit them out or cover them up or anything. I'm just like, let's roll with it. And probably it's easier to hear me. My guess is, and I've had people tell me, Tricia, you're relatable, you're accessible, you're real. Okay. And so for that reason, I don't stress if something's not perfect because, I want to reach you. I want to talk to you. I want to be right there tracking with you. And I want you to feel me. So, hey, not being a perfectionist works for me and with Heal Your Hunger. Cause, I don't want to come off glossy or perfect or phony. Because that God knows I did that. That's what I was doing when I was overeating, when I was in the food, is I was trying to be somebody I wasn't. So I was perfectionistic. I was thinking I should be somebody better than I was, better than the person God made me to be. And that led to the food. So nowadays I'm like, whatever, let her roll. It makes me less stressed. It's an easier way to be, and hopefully helps you relate more. So, and really that's the truth, is that this journey of overcoming emotional eating has so much to do with accepting who we are, warts and all, right? Like accepting who we are, warts and all, and realizing that God made us as perfect beings, or perfectly imperfect. God didn't mean for us to be glossy and phony and unreal. Like that's not who God wants us to be. Like we're meant to be real. Real is good. Who we are in our essence is great, perfect, perfectly imperfect, and so that's really what I want you to take away from today, is that you don't have to be somebody other than who you are. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything just so, because that's a lot of pressure. And the more pressure you put on yourself to be a certain way, to have it be perfect, the better the chances that you'll overeat, out of frustration and out of self-hatred because you don't measure up. So I want you to let yourself off the hook and recite to yourself, done is better than perfect. That's how we get stuff done. That's how we keep the ball rolling, and we can improve. I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to get better and to do better. Okay. So I want to just stress that, I want to be better day by day. I want to get better. I want to be better in July of this year than I was in June. I want to progress. I want to get better, but I don't want to hold myself to an unrealistic standard where I feel defeated and mad at myself and like I have to punish myself with food. Okay. So it is a balance between just, striving for improvement, striving for achievements, goals, nothing wrong with that, but not taking it to the point where you're beating up on yourself or feeling, disappointed in yourself because you're not some ideal. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with having goals. There's nothing wrong with having high standards. Often leads to a good work ethic, and there's nothing wrong with that. But so long as you have balance around it and you're sweet to yourself if you don't make the mark. Okay. And that's really what it comes down to for emotional eaters, because especially when it comes to food, when we aren't perfect in our eating, oh my goodness, we're so mean. We are so mean to ourselves. And so I want you to be sweet to yourself. If you don't eat perfectly, I want you to be sweet to yourself. And also start to realize that, it's hard to do if you don't have other tools in place. And so just trying to adhere to a diet is probably going to be impossible if you're just focusing on food and weight. So starting to deal with the emotional and mental and spiritual underpinnings of your eating issue or your disordered eating is going to make it much easier to have sanity around food. But regardless, always be sweet to yourself, and don't beat yourself up if you're not perfect in the food department. Black and white thinking around food is very dangerous. Being super strict and rigid with your eating can really backfire. And I know for myself, I've been in programs that were super perfectionistic. And it was like, if I ate one green bean too many, I was off to the races and like, I screwed that one up, and I really try to help my clients see that that's not a useful attitude either. We don't want to be black and white about anything. And yet we can strive to be better, and we can, try to, be a better version of ourselves, but not something that's idealistic or unreal. So I hope this is landing for you. You are amazing. Another saying that I have found very, very helpful in my own, journey of overcoming emotional eating is, that I'm God's favorite baby daughter. Okay. You might've heard me say this before, but I like to just say I'm God's favorite baby daughter and just affirm that who God made me is awesome. Okay. And that's true for you too. I encourage you to use that same phrase, just affirm I'm God's favorite baby daughter or son. Okay. And keep using that phrase so you'll get that who you are fundamentally is good. And you don't have to hold yourself to an unreal or ideal standard. Who you are is good, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of what you get done, regardless of what you don't get done. You are perfect in the eyes of God. So I hope that helps. Really, really, really important. The last phrase that I want to give you to help yourself climb out of this terrible pit of perfectionism and procrastination is something that Roy used to tell me all the time. My former mentor, he used to say, you're not that good at being bad. So if you're in that spiral of I suck because I'm not perfect, stop yourself and say, hey, I'm not that good at being bad. And that's the truth. We're just not, so if you're getting super critical, hypercritical of yourself, just say, hey, I'm not that good at being bad. Okay. And you got to sometimes talk yourself down off of that spiral, or out of that spiral by affirmations. And that's a really important affirmation. So I hope that's helpful. I just want to say that, we can't beat ourselves up into doing the right thing. We have to love ourselves into doing the right thing. And that's where these positive affirmations come in. That's where getting support comes in. Sometimes when we are in that negative spiral, it helps to have somebody else interrupt the pattern for us. So call a friend and say, hey, once you observe your mind and what you're doing to yourself, say, hey, I need your help to get out of the spiral. Ask for help. Get support. The women in my program, they're supporting each other. They're tattletaling on their head, on their thought. They're ratting out their thoughts, constantly and supporting each other and getting on a better track. So getting support is so, so important because when we're alone, chances are our heads are going to win, or those negative thoughts are going to win. So get support, reach out for help. And get a pattern interrupt by using positive affirmations. Again, go back to done is better than perfect. I'm God's favorite baby daughter, and you're not that good at being bad. I'm not that good at being bad. So I hope this helps. You are so good. You are so good. As emotional eaters, we have good hearts. We might not always do things perfectly, but we have good hearts. And we have to remind ourselves of that. So thank you so much. Super, super happy to be here with you. Sending you so much love. Bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to get free support, insider health info, exclusive invites to events, and more, visit healyourhunger.com.